Hi, my name's Lowell Gustafson, and on behalf of the International Big History Association, I would very much like to thank Anne Pizzorusso for offering this presentation on Renaissance Italian art, geology, and botany. Anne has been a geologist in her career, and she's done a lot of studying and work on Italian Renaissance art as well. And she brings these two facets together in her presentation today. So thank you for joining us. And again, many thanks to Anne. Anne starts her presentation by explaining the movement of tectonic plates, how this affects the continents throughout the world, and especially how it affects Italy, and that's where we pick up her presentation from there.
Then you have the African plate and the Anatolia plate, which are pushing into Sicily. And so you have Mount Etna, you have the Aeolian Islands with their volcanoes. And so to add to everything, Italy is rotating in a counterclockwise direction. So you have a country that's rocking and rolling and being squashed. It's like being in the middle of a 3-car pileup. And so if any of you have been to places in the Midwest in America where it's very flat, like Iowa or Nebraska, you can see for miles if you're in a car. And like the topography is just flat. But Italy is like this. Italy is like been all crumpled, and that's why it has its natural beauty. So you have the Apennines, which run along the spine of Italy, and as I told you, with that Adria plate coming in from the Adriatic, it's very much like your back spine. It's constantly moving. That's why you had the big earthquake in Aquila and all the historic earthquakes, and they're just going to continue because this country will not stop. So I want to take you to a place near Naples called the Campi Flegrei, because this is an historic place that was immortalized in Virgil's epic poem, the Aeneid. And here is the area where Aeneas made landfall. And this is a volcanic area with 24 craters. A lot of them are onshore, some are offshore. And Virgil lived from 70 to 19 BC. And he loved this area. And the Emperor Augustus wanted him to go to Rome, but he wouldn't leave it because he loved this volcanic area so much. And this is what his backyard looked like. He lived in Pozzuoli, and in his backyard, you have this place called the Solfatara, which is part of the Campi Flegrei, which comes from the Greek meaning flaming fields. And so he used this as a model for his underworld because he has Aeneas going into the underworld. He crosses the river Styx and arrives at the underworld. Now, adjacent to this, I'm going to show you is the person who accompanied him was the Sybil of Kuma, or the Oracle of Kuma. You're familiar with like the Oracle of Delphi, which they had these priestesses who were priestesses of the cult of Apollo. So you had Kuma, you had Delphi, and these women were like oracles, and all of the top political people and powerful people would go, and they would cast their prognostications for elections, for wars, for famines. And they thought that this might have been the entryway into her grotto, where she would give the prognostications. This is in Kuma, right near that area of the Campi Flegrei. But they found out that, in fact, it was just kind of a covered walkway where the military would bring their equipment in and out. But what is so fascinating about this is that this was constructed in 300 BC, and it is constructed out of the yellow Neapolitan tufa rock. And it is extraordinary because this tufa rock has maintained its structural integrity because it's very easy to carve. And it's withstood 2,500 years of earthquakes and other eruptions. And it is still magnificently beautiful architecturally and structurally. It's maintained its integrity. And that's one of the things that you find in Italy is you find all these different types of rocks that were used for tombs, that were used for architectural detail. And the people in the local area knew exactly what rock was supposed to be used for what purpose. Here is the Sybil of Kuma, who Michelangelo portrayed in the Sistine Chapel. And the reason why he portrayed the Sybil of Kuma and also the other Sybils, like the Sybil, or I use the word Sybil and Oracle interchangeably, was that they had prognosticated the coming of a savior. And so he put these women in the Sistine Chapel as priestesses who had the power of prognosticating the future. Here is Lake Vernon, which is also in this area, and Virgil used this as the entryway to the underworld. What happened was Aeneas and the Sybil of Kuma made their way into the underworld from an entryway near this lake. And there's an ancient Roman gallery here by this lake. And I was able to go into it. And then you go down some stairs and there's an underground river there. Now, whether this is the river Styx, I do not know, but it might be an underground river or an aquifer or a fault. But if you look in this area, Virgil talked about all of the things that you can actually see today. He used them as models, and he used the geology of the area to come up with his idea of the underworld, the river Styx, and the Sybil of Kuma. So I just think it's amazing that in everything I'm going to show you today, you can come to Italy and actually see what ancient writers and artists had portrayed in their works. We're going to move over just a little bit on the Gulf of Naples. This is Vesuvius in the center. And a number of writers came here and they wanted they wanted an Italian experience, but when they came to Naples, something happened. Shelley came here, his wife, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, wrote Frankenstein, and she was very inspired by Naples and the Campi Flegrei, which I showed you before. As a matter of fact, she had Dr. Victor Frankenstein be born in Naples. And Mark Twain came here, Alexander Dumas, also Goethe came. And what was common to all of these great writers is they all had like nervous breakdowns when they got to Naples. And they all felt that there was something either in the earth or in the atmosphere that just hit them very hard as artists. And they all went on to write their best works after this experience in Naples. And Goethe talked about Naples and the Neapolitans, and he said that the reason why he thought the Neapolitans were so crazy was that they were living with death every day. At the time, Vesuvius was erupting, and he felt that living with in such a dangerous area really affected the character of the people in the area. he went on to write a beautiful travel book about his Italian journeys and really fell in love with the geology of Italy. Another area right in the Gulf of Naples near the Campi Flegrei is my favorite. This is called Baia. And Baia was the ancient residence of all of the big emperors, Nero, Augustus, Claudius. And this place was Sin City because it had power and it had money and it had perversion. And people just partied and went over the top, and they had these boats going out in the bay, and they had bacchanals. And what happened was that it was such a great power center that everybody built a big villa along the coastline. Now, they also had this huge thermal spa, which the Roman engineers, remember I showed you those fumaroles that were all of the steam coming out of the ground a couple of slides ago? Well, they harnessed that, the hot water and the thermal steam, to bring to the big Roman spa so that the emperor and all of the rich people could have steam baths and saunas and get massages. The thermal spa is still there, but on the other side of the road, all of the enormous villas are gone. But what they found out is that they're not really gone, they're just underwater, because there is a big magma chamber, like a big balloon underwater, and it expands and contracts like a balloon. And what happened is, it's almost like the earth was conspiring and colluding with these people to have like a stage. You know how a stage can go up and down and it still leaves all the items that was on stage intact? Well, they just brought all the villas down, and they're only about 20 feet underwater. And you can go snorkeling or scuba diving, and you can see the mosaic floors, the columns, their statues. This is a recreation because the original statue is in the museum there. And then you have all of the bubbles coming up from the fumaroles and the gases. And this is a statue from the Nymphaeum of the Emperor Claudius. As I said, it's a reproduction, but all the originals are in the museum. So it's just, this doesn't exist anywhere on Earth, where you have, it's called bradicism, the Earth moving up and down, and it just brought all of the Roman villas to rest downward. Who knows? Maybe one day they'll come up and they'll be back up on the surface of the land. But it's a marvelous place. I want to talk a little bit about the Etruscans, who I love. This is an indigenous population in Italy with their origins. The origins are called Villanovan population at about 1500 BC. And while they were in many parts of Italy, I want to talk to you mainly about their presence in Tuscany. What the Etruscans did is they built their towns on hilltops, of course, for security purposes. And they also built their towns in areas that were difficult to reach. And this is an area, and this particular landform is called drapery due to the erosion patterns. In Italian, it's called calanchi. And since you can see all the gorges and you can see the difficulty in reaching from one point to another, the Etruscans became excellent big bridge builders and road builders. And you can actually see some of their bridges from 2,500 years ago that are still intact, and their roads that are still intact. So it was the land and the challenges of the land that turned them into excellent engineers. They also had their own geothermal deposits, and they would use them for baths and therapy. And even today, we have a huge geothermal plant called Lardarello, and it's the third largest geothermal plant in the world. They also have these wonderful baths in Tuscany, near the area of Saturnia is very famous, but these are free. That you just go there and you can enjoy the minerals that are dissolved in the water, and the heat and the steam are very good for skin problems, for joint problems, and for respiratory problems as well. And so it just seemed like the Etruscans were living in this garden of paradise, because they had fertile soil, they had mineral deposits, which were very important. They had these thermal baths, so they really, really had a very good lifestyle. This is also something that's very, very mysterious. These are cave roads, and the Etruscans carved them out of volcanic tuff, which was easy enough to excavate. But they're very strange, because they can range from 60 to 90 feet tall, about 8 foot wide, and you walk through them and you get this sense of claustrophobia because they're so tall. But nobody knows what they were for. Some of them are parallel, some of them are in a labyrinth pattern. The only commonality they have between one road and another is they all pass through necropolises. So maybe they were used for ceremonial purposes, but I just can't understand why anybody would carve out these massive roads just for ceremonial purposes. So it's one of the big mysteries of archaeology, but they are just fascinating to walk through. This is also Lake Bolzaina, which is in Tuscany, and this was a sacred lake of the Etruscans. They would go out to one of the islands in the middle of the lake for their sacred rituals. And this lake is enormous. It's 44 square miles. When I got to my hotel, I arrived around midnight, and when I looked out my window the next morning, I thought I was looking at the Mediterranean. I mean, it was vast. It's, for those of you who are familiar with New York, it's twice the size of the island of Manhattan. It is a big volcanic lake and very sacred. They were also very, I think, ecological. I really admire the Etruscan religion because it was all land-based. It was having great reverence for nature and trying to discover what nature wanted, how you could revere nature, and how you could make sure that you were acting in harmony with the earth. And what the Etruscan priests would do is that they would look at lightning strikes. And it's amazing because the volcanic territory in Tuscany was electromagnetically charged. So you had many different colors and types of lightning there. And some meteorologists talk about lightning, and they say the most spectacular lightning forms are those associated with volcanoes. So you can imagine that the Etruscans saw some incredible lightning. And why did they do this? Because they were trying to figure out what the messages were that were being sent from heaven. And they developed comprehensive notebooks if the lightning originated in the east and finished in the west, and the quadrants of the sky. And they would all use this information to predict the future. So these were the Etruscan priests, the aruspice. And if you look at his hat, the hat still exists in the form of the mitre used in the Catholic Church by the bishops and the cardinals. And he would also have a scepter in his hand, which is, of course, you see the Pope and the cardinals with a scepter. So much of the garb in the Catholic Church came from the Etruscans. But what happened is when they were conquered by the Romans had such respect for their powers of divination and their priests that they brought their priests to Rome, and they acted as consultants, much like the Sybil of Kuma, the Oracle of Delphi, because these were people who really were very practiced in the art of predicting and prognosticating the future. Then Italy, as I told you, is all crumpled up. And as a result, it has all different kinds of rock. It's much like a patchwork quilt. So you can find limestone and you can find metamorphic rocks and sandstone. And it's these deposits of limestone that make for some of the most beautiful caverns in the world. This is one in Frasassi. Lowell, I don't know whether you went there when you were in Col di Gioco, but it's right near Alessandro's place. And some of the formations are formed by different deposition rates. These are formed by little rivulets of water that's saturated with calcium carbonate, and as it solidifies, it forms these beautiful drapery patterns. You have these soda straw patterns formed by little droplets of water imbued with calcium carbonate. In America, we call them soda straws. In Italy, of course, they call them spaghetti. And then this is how a column is formed when a stalagmite and a stalactite eventually get drawn together, and then they will join, forming a column. Now, in Puglia region, which is in the heel of Italy, in 1932, they discovered this cave called the Grotto of Scaloria. And what they found is they found all of these little terracotta cups collecting the stalactite drip water. And the archaeologists couldn't figure out, what this was for, because there was adequate drinking water. It wouldn't be used to drink or use. These cups were very small. Here's one from a museum. And as you can see, the stalagmite grew and broke the terracotta cup. But what they realized is that in Italy for millennium, women have been going to these caves and actually collecting this drip water and rubbing the drip water on their breasts to assure adequate breast milk. And this was occurring, I would say, till about 100 years ago. Maybe it even occurs today, but it's not anything that was ancient. It's modern. It has just come through the millennia. And these milk caves are called latte, from the Italian word milk, latte. And I just finished an article that was published about a month ago on these milk caves. And they're doing a lot of research on what would be the chemical composition of this water. And what the scientists have found out is that they have a lot of minerals, they have bacteria, they have fungi, and they have this one type of bacteria called Macronus bipunctata, which is combined with the others, is a substance that improves your immune system and is very therapeutic for your health. So on some level, these women must have known that this drip water would be efficacious for their health. And I just thought it was absolutely amazing that now modern science is catching up with what people knew thousands of years ago. The other cave that is very famous is the one in La Verna. And this cave is the cave in which St. Francis received his stigmata. You can go there today as well. And this is a fresco by Giotto. And if you also go to the International Big History website, Lowell put up my article on St. Francis and Giotto, because while St. Francis was the revolutionary in changing people's idea about nature, he expounded the idea that all things in nature were creations by God and they should be respected. I take the position that as enlightening as his words were, they would have gotten lost in the 800 years since his death. However, it was Giotto who took St. Francis's words and put them into these frescoes that we still have today. And Giotto was revolutionary in that he put all the rock formations, he put the plants, he put the veneration of nature in these religious scenes. And people could see that God was on earth. God gave us the gifts of nature. So I directly credit Giotto with allowing St. Francis's ideas to come forward and be with us today. And as you can see, he has all identifiable rock formations. He has a cave that mimics the stigmata in his hand. Even the church is made out of a limestone. Giotto used a lot of pastel colored buildings, pinks and grays and light yellows, which are all reflective of the limestone in the area. They're not flights of fancy. So today in Puglia, this is the Grotto of St. Michael, which is very, very famous. But it wasn't always a grotto of St. Michael. What happened was this was a pagan grotto, and the Catholic Church just decided to do a marvelous job of rebranding and just hung out the St. Michael grotto sign. And there you go. You have a grotto that can perform miracles. But I do have to say that when you have these sacred spaces that have been used for religious purposes for millennia, there's something very special in these places. Here, the walls weep with the water. They sell the stones. I have my little Saint, I don't know whether they can see it. Can you see it? This is my St. Michael stone that I got there. I have my St. Michael stone. And it's funny because like in 1656, the Archbishop of Naples told everybody to have a St. Michael stone in their pocket because it protected them against the plague. So, I don't know, we might want to get St. Michael stones, but these places just exude a spirituality that was accumulated over the millennia. The other thing is, in Italy, it's different than like in France. You have Lescaut, which is now closed. You can't go into it. And a lot of the prehistoric caves in other countries in Spain and France are closed to the public. In Italy, it's not like that. You go there, you can experience the grotto experience, the cavern experience. And I think it's the collective experience over thousands of years from prehistoric man to us that really make these places very, very special. Here's another famous place, and my favorite, because I'm actually 150 years old, but I go to Ischia on a regular basis, and it's the island of eternal youth, because boy, they have things here that just take the years off you. Ischia is in the Gulf of Naples, just about 10 miles from Naples. And you can go and sit in the water. These are all, this is seawater, but people are sitting next to an output of volcanic thermal water that's coming right in. It's very, very hot here. And then you can actually get painted up with the volcanic mud. And what's happened is that the first Greeks arrived in Ischia around 750 BC. And in the 1700s, they discovered all of these votive offerings, these bas-relief, and they're all dedicated to the god Apollo. And as you can see, all of the women here have shells in little cups for the waters, because they were giving thanks to Apollo for the healing waters of Ischia. So the waters have been known since 750 BC to be efficacious for a lot of medical ailments. So what is so special about these waters? Well, in 1918, Marie Curie went to Ischia. She had just discovered radioactivity, and she decides to test the waters. And what happened is the waters are mildly radioactive. So what you have, which is particular to Ischia, is you have this trifecta of healing properties in the water. You have heat, you have minerals, and you have radioactivity. And actually, these waters are prescribed by the Italian government health authorities, and you can go and get different treatments for free, covered by the Italian nationalized health service. They're wonderful for arthritis. They're wonderful for if you can inhale them, for respiratory problems. And I always wondered about the radioactivity. There's a lot of research coming out of India on mild levels of radioactivity improving your immune system. And the National Institute of Health in America has articles on how these waters in inhalations are good for childhood asthma. So there's all sorts of research being done on the efficacy of these marvelous waters. Now, I told you I was going to go into Leonardo da Vinci being the inventor of Twitter, Instagram, and Google Maps. So here is one tweet. The ancient bottoms of the sea have become mountain ridges. I think this is a good tweet. And what happened was Leonardo actually went into the Alps. He saw these fossils way at the top of these mountains. The Catholic Church was saying it was the result of the deluge. And Leonardo goes, no, these rocks were underwater at one time and they were uplifted. And so I think it's marvelous that he was able to put a whole concept of structural geology in one tweet. Instagram. They do not know why the Arno never keeps its channel. It's because the rivers which flow into it deposit soil where they enter and wear it away from the other side, bending the river there. So he has this description, and then he actually has a picture of the different depositional environments in the Arno and why it's being why soil is being deposited on one side and scoured from another. Now, when I went to the Windsor Library, the Queen of England has an enormous collection of Leonardo's sketches and designs, and it's positively amazing to actually get that close to see these things. And I found this diagram in the box of Leonardo drawings, and I asked the librarian what this was. Because it was paper folded in 4 pieces with these designs of, like, it was almost like a survey, you know, this block and this number and this house and everything. And she said, yeah, he was taking inventory of the buildings in the town of Imola, because he was working for Cesare Borgia, as a military engineer. That was his other career. And I just became very fascinated with the scrap of paper. Well, what was he doing with it? Well, it turns out eventually he would do this detailed map of Imola because Cesare Borgia had to, this was his fortress, and he had to figure out ways of escaping should he need to. So Leonardo made a drawing of every house and every building in the city. And what I did is I did an analysis, and I said, well, this is like a Google map. And if you look at a Google map and superimpose it on Leonardo's drawing, it fits perfectly. So this is what Google Maps do. This is called an iconographic map. And this is a Google map, and that paper that I showed you a couple of slides ago is exactly what Leonardo did. And then he came up with the first Google map. So I want to now talk to you about the Virgin of the Rocks. If you would just look at these two paintings for a moment, I'll give you a moment. The one on your left is in the Louvre, and the one on your right is in the National Gallery. And I just want you to look at them. If anything comes up into your mind, just hold that thought, because I want to explain the difference in these two paintings. So anyway, the one in the Louvre was painted in around 1486, and the one in the National Gallery was painted about 1490. They keep changing the date. So anyway, in the Louvre version, you have the most incredible demonstration of geology. You have different types of rocks. Above the Virgin's head, you can see the difference in the texture of the rocks, and I'm going to show you some detailed close-ups here. And you have perfect plants. So you have perfect botany and perfect geology in this Louvre painting. Here you had a little better view of the difference in rocks. Above her head is diabase, and then right by her head is a weathered sandstone, and you can identify them perfectly. Here we have bedded sandstone, and then we have this plant is Iris germanicus, and then the leaves, everything is perfect botanically. Leonardo drew his plants perfectly. Part of the reason, I think, is not only to be faithful to the artistry, but at the time there was a great deal of emphasis on herbalists. So if you were going to recommend a plant for medical purposes, you had to be sure you had the right plant. So I think a lot of the detail and the precision came to be because it had to be exhibited. You use this plant for this medicine. Now, if you look at the bottom, that's the London painting, and the top is the Louvre version. At the top, I showed you the bedded sandstone. You can see there are some pebbles there. The plants are readily identifiable. If you really look closely, I can't show it to you here, there are different geological formations called soul marks, which are marks on the stone. In the bottom version, I cannot identify the rock. It's very poorly painted. It's like somebody didn't care, just did not care. If you look at the right-hand side, it's like somebody slapped some paint there, and, the rocks just were not important. It looks like the baby's going to fall into an abyss there. And then you get to the plants, and the plants are all fantasy plants. They don't exist in nature. So you have all the way over to the left, kind of that daffodil-y looking plant, but it's on the wrong stalk. And everything is fake. And also these plants couldn't exist in a grotto because it's dark. They're almost like, florist kind of plants. So everything is wrong with the London Geology and Botany, and everything's perfect in the Paris painting. So I did this sketch, and it's very hard for me to say anything. I can't identify anything in the London version. Everything is lacking, and everything is slapdash in this painting from a geological standpoint. If I look at the Louvre version, it's a tour de force. You have what's called columnar joints in the center. You have a sill that's not 90 degrees. All of these things are not meaningful to you, I would think, but to a geologist, it's like, wow, this is just incredible that somebody would put all of this detail in this painting. And I have to say that everything Leonardo painted, if it had rocks in it, the rocks were accurate. So you can use geological accuracy into determining whether a painting is by Leonardo or not, because he never let us down. Everything he painted was perfect and precise geologically. So you can see the difference in the two paintings. So I want to just bring up another subject, since this is the Feast of the Immaculate Conception today, that this painting was, the Louvre painting on the left was painted for the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. And the story goes like this. First of all, the Immaculate Conception, what is it? The Immaculate Conception says that Mary was conceived without sin, because certain factions felt, well, how could Jesus be without sin if he came from a mother that was sinful, was conceived in sin? Meaning both Jesus and Mary were conceived by the Holy Spirit without sexual intercourse. And so the Franciscans believed that Mary was conceived without sin, and they were called Immaculists. But the Dominicans thought this was insane, and they were fighting the Franciscans, and they were called Maculists. And so what happened is, when the Franciscans came to give Leonardo this commission, we want you to paint a painting of the Virgin Mary for the Immaculate Conception. And one of the things they put in the contract was, we want you to put lots of rocks and plants in the painting. And this was wonderful, because this goes back to the Franciscan idea that I had told you about, that occurred 250 years before, that St. Francis and then Giotto put plants and rocks into the painting. And for the Franciscans, nature was very, very important. So now Leonardo's in a dilemma. How is he going to paint this painting of the Immaculate Conception without irritating the Dominicans? Because maybe the Dominicans want to give him a commission in the future. So what he decides is, he's going to put her in a grotto. He's going to put lots of rocks, beautiful rocks and plants there. And the grotto what is the grotto a symbol of? It's a symbol of the feminine dimension. It's the uterus, it's the womb. And so Leonardo, in painting this painting, just came up with the ultimate diplomatic way of dealing with the issue in a beautiful, beautiful painting that's full of nature, but gives great reverence to the feminine dimension. And I thought, wow, he was a real genius here. And so that's the story of this painting that we're celebrating today in the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. And I thought it was like very fortuitous that we talked today. So I want to leave you with just a couple of Leonardo's sayings, because he says it better than anybody else. To develop a complete mind, study the science of art, study the art of science, learn how to see, realize that everything connects to everything else. And also, I roamed the countryside searching for answers to things I did not understand. These questions and other strange phenomena engaged my thought throughout my life. And so I leave you with a question. When you go out today, tomorrow, the next day, what secrets will the earth reveal to you? So if you'd like to look at my site, it's just my name. I have a lot of different things there and other papers which you might enjoy reading and other books. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, Anne.
Bravo. Thank you.
You know, Anne has taken Leonardo da Vinci's advice. She has roamed the Italian countryside
Yes.
and has the Italian earth has revealed a marvelous science of art and art of science, and this brilliant integration to Anne as a result. So thank you for that. And I guess please feel free to unmute yourself. I'm not going to run roughshod over that.
Yeah.
And let me just open it up to anyone who's got a question or a brief comment, if you would.
Well, I'd like to say I'm an economist and a lawyer, which means I have no expertise in your field, but I recognize a wonderful scholarship when I see it, and also delightful presentation. Thank you very much. I have been educated, entertained, and I loved it. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's what we're here for, right, Lowell?
You know, it really is. I think that's there's a lot of takeaways from Anne's presentation, but one is that John was saying he's not an expert in this field. This is one of the challenges of big history. None of us are experts in all of the fields, and we can't hope to be. The brilliance of everything being connected is in our willingness to talk with each other, to express our connections with each other. We can draw on each other's expertise and tie them together in ways that we just wouldn't have imagined before that. And so, John, you're bragging a little bit by saying you're not an expert in these things.
Didn't mean to.
Well, I just would like to make two comments, if I would. I feel that in our day and age, maybe we have to, but we've gotten into a one-track mind. Oh, I'm just in tech. I'm just this. I'm that. Whereas before, in Leonardo's time, you can see, I mean, he was billing himself as a Renaissance engineer. He was this, he was that, he studied mathematics, and people really, that's why you call them Renaissance men, because they had exposure to all sorts of things. And I think that's lacking. And I think that's what big history brings to all of us, that we get exposure. That's all we need is exposure. We don't have to become an expert. But I'll tell you a funny story. It's like, I just really wanted to learn Italian late in life. And then one thing led to another, and I ended up getting a master's degree in Italian Renaissance studies. But when I went into these classes, I mean, all these people were speaking fluent Italian. They were all PhD students. They were all, very snobbish to me. And I really felt very alienated, very like, I don't know anything. They're all great and everything. So I thought I got to get an angle here. I gotta like figure out what to do. And so what I thought is, what do I know? I know geology. And so I just like always was looking for a place where I could find geology or apply geology to something. And I ended up applying geology to everything. And so I really came up with some revolutionary things in the fields of art and science that nobody had done, because I'm showing my geologist friends Leonardo da Vinci paintings, and I said, oh, like, look at these rocks, and they're going, what's going on? And I got them interested in art. And then I got artists interested in Leonardo's appreciation for geology. So to your point, John, it's like, if you're interested in different kinds of mustard, like maybe you use that to develop, where the mustard is grown, the type of soil. So it just seems if you can play to your strengths, with your background, you can just go like crazy into all different fields.
I'll just say that's why I'm here.
Good.
Thanks again.
Oh, John, here we go. I got to tell you this. So anyway, there is like a lot of controversy about the two versions of the Virgin of the Rocks, not only from my work on the geology, but there was a 25-year long legal case involving the two versions because the Franciscans didn't want to pay, because Leonardo went off with the one in the Louvre, and then the Franciscans wanted their painting, and I have a friend who went through all the legal documents, and they're written in notarial Latin. And he said, nobody wants to look at the documents, but he found out that the one in London was not by Leonardo because of the legal wrangling. So there again, I mean, you need somebody with legal skills too.
That's wonderful. It just reinforced your analysis of the painting. And you said this basically isn't Leonardo.
Yeah, because the rocks aren't
right. So your friend's legal analysis just
right.
confirmed what you had already proven. Very nice. Very nice.
So there's just, as I said, there's so many applications for so many skills. I mean, I'm also looking for Latin scholars, because I would, many times they talked about the earth moving or the great fires, but it's written in Latin and Greek, and if somebody would give me these references, I would love to do, an analysis of, oh, that's what happened to this town, or this town got destroyed. But, you need the Latin and Greek scholars to be on the lookout for that kind of stuff.
Karen, I think I see your hand up. Please.
Yes, thank you, Lowell. Long time no see.
Great to see you.
I so enjoyed what you had to present today from so many perspectives. It's exactly the kind of cross-disciplinary work that fascinates me and always has. And one of the things that you brought up that I want to add to is some of these grottos that have been honored by all kinds of people way preceding Christianity, honoring place and the sensory experience that you yourself actually can pick up on in being in a place like that. I had an experience 15 years ago of having climbed to the top of a sacred peak in New Mexico and meeting a geologist at the top who proceeded to talk all about the geology in the area. And on our way back down, he shared with me that when he goes to other countries, he can actually know where the sacred places are, where the sacred sites are, without anybody telling him, because he can literally sense into the energy of those places.
Yes.
And he came from a culture, he was Hispanic, and he came from a culture where they were taught that they belong to Earth rather than that separation.
Yes.
And so no matter how many PhDs he had, which he did, they didn't separate him from that knowing of where people honored Earth in these geologic places. So I
Wow.
loved that you brought that up, and I'll bet you have lots of experiences you could probably share on that one.
I do. I have one in particular because like I get very emboldened because I feel like, I don't have anything to lose, you know what I mean? So I went to this conference, and because I did this map in the book that showed that the Etruscan cities were in areas that had negative geomagnetic fields. And they say if you have a negative geomagnetic field, it's very calming. And I saw that there were positive geomagnetic fields in the surrounding areas, but there were no cities there. And I thought, wow, I really need to get some geophysicists to look at this, because I'm wondering if there's anything there. So I sign up, and I wrote this big abstract for the European Geological Conference, but I put it in the geophysical section, right? And I got accepted. And so I was like the last speaker, and people are, doing all of these calculus formulas and this and that. And I'm like sinking in the back, and I thought, I just have to leave. I can't go up there and talk. But then I thought, and I have nothing to lose. And all I did is I showed my map, and I said, the Etruscans, just went, and they could feel these sacred sites. And I said, I am looking now if you guys have the newest geomagnetic map of Italy. I'd like to superimpose that over these sites and see what we could come up with, right? So like the head of the Italian Geophysical Union was there. I thought he was going to have a heart attack. And he goes, well, you contact me, and I'll give you the date of the map and everything. But then what happened is, since I was the last speaker, these people kept coming up to me saying like, I've been in that area and I feel things, and I brought my children there, and everybody had felt something there, but nobody would dare say anything during the conference. And I thought, I bet there's stuff out there,
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, and I want to thank you for. Are you hearing me?
Yes, yes,
Are you hearing me? Yes.
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 But living in Italy, I am very, very appreciated. I am also emotionated from your talk. Thank you very much. Because your fascinating connection with our history, our art, and even our character,
Yes.
and collecting all this kind of geology, I think is very makes it's very fascinating, but open a new address, because your operation can be done with every place, every people, you know.
Yes,
so-
yes.
And so, you know, you can find just also a new way to study and to understand the deep identity of peoples, you know.
Yes.
And so it is, I think it is a sort of local big history, you know, because starting from local,
Yes.
you can connect into geology, you can open, but anyway, thank you very much. It's very interesting.
Thank you, Alberto. I had the same, I would love to do, you know, people do tweeting Da Vinci in Egypt, in China, every country. I would love to read their books about their geology and culture. That to me would be wonderful. I agree with you completely. And it's always been my dream. Every time I meet somebody from another country and I say, why don't you do this book for your country? I want to read it.
Thank you. Thank you very much again.
Where, Alberto, where are you in Italy?
I'm living in northern Italy, in a little town between Milan and Turin. It's Vercelli. It's, you know, it is a historical town because Roman and before
Yes.
Roman Celtic people were just living here. You know, that's is also a town in which Avogadro, you know, makes his famous law. You know, that's the beginning of modern chemistry. You know.
Yes, yes, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Well, I don't want to cut off the discussion prematurely. If there's one more comment or question, that's fine. But if not now, let me just say, you know, I get to teach at a university, and for me, a person who loves rocks and who loves art is the type of person that best exemplifies the real purpose of what a university is about, this universe of knowledge, a love of science, a love of art and the humanities, and a profound respect for both, I think is at the heart of what universities are at their best. And so I would really like to thank Anne for exemplifying what I think is the lodestar of the world that I live in, and that too often we don't really achieve very well in our institutions, but I think that we have here. So thank you so much, Anne, and thanks to all of you for,
Yes, thank you.
for joining us today. And we'll look forward to future discussions. There's always more to be discussing.
Okay, thank you all for joining. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, buon anno, arrivederci, buonanotte.